Everyone's been admitted to these.
Okay. Okay, we are back. Can I get a motion from the Finance Committee to take action?
This is Jackson. I approve to recommend to implement the targeted compensation increases.
This is Wilkes. I'll second.
And is that the same recommendation you're making for the Personnel Committee?
This is Jackson. I approve to recommend to implement targeted compensation increases on the personnel committee.
Ms. Cole, I will second.
Okay, all those in favor for finance signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
All in favor for personnel signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes for personnel.
Personnel.
Yeah, I think personnel, if there's anything else, with nothing else, personnel stands adjourned.
All right, moving on to the Finance Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the October 17th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Is that a yes?
No, I'm trying to
Okay.
trying to switch gears.
Okay. All right. There being no changes to the minutes as submitted are approved. Next, the audit of the bills to be paid. Bill, do you have any updates for us?
No additions tonight.
All right, then can I get a motion or does anybody have questions for Bill about the bills, credit card, invoices? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the audit bills.
Thank you. A second?
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the audit of the bills to be paid signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Moving to agreements and contracts, we have three. The first one is the transit service agreement between the city of Madison and the city of Middleton. No action is anticipated on this, and I believe we have the Metro General Manager.
Yeah, that is correct. We have this just on Finance Committee this evening for our first discussion of this topic. Metro General Manager Justin Stuenberg is available on the Zoom to speak to both the request from Madison Metro for an updated agreement that would affect City of Middleton as well as their other municipal partners, and available to answer questions. In the packet, I just want to highlight that there is a memo that I put together trying to provide some background on the issue, a summary of the financial projections for 2024 based on updated numbers from Madison Metro. And then included in your agreement is a draft of the new partner agreement, as well as a summary of changes to that document. Those last two items were both prepared by Madison Metro.
Okay, great. And are we going to get a presentation from Justin Stuenberg or just a?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a formal presentation, but perhaps, Justin, if you'd be able to speak to Madison's request for a new agreement, that might be helpful to start the discussion.
Certainly. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So first, sorry that I'm not there in person. I'm on child duty tonight. So, but anyway, thanks for the chance to discuss this with you. I guess I'll lay out a couple different items here, but happy to go into more depth on any particular topic you'd like. So first, just a general overview of our contractual relationship as it currently stands between Madison and Middleton. As you know, we are not a contractor. Madison Metro and the city of Madison are not a contractor. It is a partnership agreement. And so when we structured the current agreement, it's basically set up for Middleton to pay into an operating reserve and for us to bill actual costs out of that operating reserve. And so it's structured that way to provide a little bit more certainty for you to not get unexpected bills, which was happening under the previous agreement, 3 years or so ago. but it ultimately is an actual cost share. It's not a it's not a fixed fee type contract. We've done that essentially to protect both sides, because we really don't want a situation where either side is profiting off of or losing money to the other, and it truly is a partnership. So that's the way the current contract is structured. However, we've run into a couple issues specifically with the contract, and then I'll talk more specifically about your contract as well. So that structure of paying into an operating reserve and then billing out of the operating reserve is causing us some challenges with our auditing process. So basically, our auditors are viewing that as a cash account that we need to reconcile before we can complete the audit. However, the problem is that in order to fully reconcile that account, we need our fully audited financials. And so it's creating this kind of chicken and egg problem, which is surmountable, but adds considerable time to our auditing process as we continue to go round and round, back and forth. Every time a change is made in one number, it changes the other number, and then therefore changes that. And so it's just basically a circular logic type problem. And so the request for a revised agreement kind of was born out of that. But we also identified a handful of other things to just make it a bit more streamlined, a bit clearer, that we tried to incorporate in there as well. And so that's the general overview for the request for a new contract generally. And we are having these discussions with all of our partners, not just Middleton, about this revised contract agreement. We're really trying to make sure we're trying to standardize these contracts to the extent possible, so that we minimize the any perceptions of favoritism from one partner to another, but then also just for us to have a consistent agreement that we can follow that doesn't vary from one jurisdiction to the other. And just for background as well for all of you, we actually have partnership agreements with Middleton, Verona, Fitchburg, and Sun Prairie, as well as the University of Wisconsin, the Madison College, and the Madison Metropolitan School District, and UW Health as well. So we have a lot of these agreements to manage, and so it's in our interest to try to keep them as consistent as possible. However, the one difference I think with Middleton's agreement compared to the others, we updated Middleton's agreement about a year ago, and that version is newer than all of our other partnership agreements, and that was done specifically because Middleton transitioned to being a direct Tier B funding recipient from the state, whereas all the other partners were already Tier Bs. Middleton previously shared in the city of Madison's revenue from the state, but with the plan to switch to getting your funding directly from the state, that required an updated agreement. When we put that agreement together, I'll be honest, a mistake was made in not updating the hourly rates to reflect the way that state funding was coming in. And so that resulted in what appears in your current 2023 budget, as well as the original 2024 budget, as a cost savings to you going forward. However, that was never the intent. We were intending for the additional revenues coming from the state funding to offset some of the additional service that went into with the network redesign that went into place this past June. So in our discussion, in our mind, as far as Madison is concerned, we had assumed that your local subsidy was relatively flat with these service changes. And that was our intent. However, because we did not update correctly those hourly rates when that change was made, as I said, it's appearing as if your costs would have gone down. But in reality, because of the way that the partnership contract is structured, if you your cost wouldn't actually go down. What you paid into the operating reserve would go down, but we would still bill the full cost out of that operating reserve, meaning that it would be depleted relatively quickly. And so the contract does have some remedies for that, and kind of triggering some automatic plus ups in that if that reserve drops below a certain threshold. And so the one wrinkle in Middleton's contract that differs from the other partners is correcting those hourly rates to reflect something much closer to what we anticipate to be the actual costs. And that is important, not just because of drawing down the operating reserve, but specifically because of the way that the state transit aid is calculated. So what Bill has on the screen here, you can see the line, the estimated state transit aid. That is actually based on what your budgeted amount, budgeted cost is. So as you can see, right, with a higher budgeted cost also comes a higher amount of state funding. However, if under the current scenario, we would be billing you the 1.25 million, and you would be receiving the 872,000 from the state. But the actual cost at the end of the year when we build the operating reserve would be the 1.7. And so you're depleting your operating reserve substantially and also losing out on several $100,000 of state money. And so that's why I think it's important to rectify this issue. And again, I'll fully admit that a mistake was made when we made that adjustment to your contract to reflect the new state dollars. But ultimately, I think it is in all of our interests to rectify this to make sure that it's fixed so that we can bring in the maximum amount of state dollars for you. So again, that's a broad overview. Happy to dive into more details wherever you would like. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Justin. Do any members of finance have questions? Oh, Larry.
Justin, this is Larry Beckler, the city attorney. Has there been any contact in terms of what's in the contract proposal now from the other municipalities and the other entities? Or is this fairly preliminary at this point in time?
So we have shared this with all of our other municipal partners. So Fitchburg, Verona, and Sun Prairie, and you. We have had some preliminary feedback from Fitchburg and Sun Prairie. We haven't heard anything back from Verona yet. Most of the comments back were relatively minor, some modifications to indemnification clauses, things like that. And so we're kind of waiting to get any sort of feedback from all the other all the partners, so that we can, hopefully none of that feedback conflicts with each other, so that we can just make those changes and move forward. But I'm due to reach back out to everybody just as a reminder to get any comments back to us as soon as possible.
And what is your anticipated timeline for all of the parties to approve a final contract?
It's I don't have a specific timeline. I think ideally we would have the new contract go into effect for the 2024 calendar year. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be approved by December 31st of this year, but I would say as early in the year as possible, so that it's approved before our first quarter bills go out for service.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Larry. And yeah, I had a question about how likely would it be that you're going to be able to work with all the different municipalities, what there are 5, or Middleton's 1, so there are 4, to make sure that our agreements are all the same. Sounds like we have some flexibility to approve this in early 2024 instead of trying to rush this in 2023. And I appreciate that.
Yep.
One thing I'll note, Larry, does the equal benefits clause need to go into this?
I guess it does for us.
Middleton has an equal benefits clause in our ordinance, and I'm sure Larry will share that with you.
And I know Madison follows all of those policies, but this is an ordinance requirement in Middleton, which you will not find onerous in Madison because you're already doing all these things. But we do require it to be in our contract. Well, I'll get it to you.
Sounds good.
Any
Excuse
other
me,
questions
Chair.
from Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment related to the timeline that our application for the state funding for the next calendar year is, I believe, due on December 15th. So even if we don't have a completely finalized agreement by all parties, I think we'd want to be far enough along in the process that we feel comfortable with the numbers to use for that application. And I did want to just note, to tie this back to our budget discussions, that based on where the recommended budget is, we have a local levy for transit of $529,095. That is about $40,000 under the calculated cost, under the numbers here. However, what our recommendation is that we take a portion of that extra transit funding that came from the state in our 2023 budget. We'll have that in a transit special revenue fund, and we'll be able to apply that over the next 3 years to transition into the numbers under this new agreement, which is what's shown on the bottom of this slide.
Can you just restate that again, where that transit special revenue comes from?
Yeah, so in the 2023 budget, we ended up receiving about $220,000 additional state aid compared to what we had originally budgeted. And that was due to a difference in the state aid being calculated based on gross rather than net cost.
Okay.
So out of that 220, we used about 100,000 of that for bus shelter improvements.
Okay.
And then the recommendation was to put 120,000 into a transit special revenue fund. And that gives us some flexibility to adjust to the new numbers that were provided by Metro over the term of this agreement.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Bill. And yeah, I'm assuming the numbers aren't what I'm concerned about so much as just the language of the agreement. So I hope we can meet that December 15th deadline. Any other questions for Justin? I had one. Are the bus drivers unionized?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right.
So as noted, there was no action required tonight. I think if there's general support with going forward, we'll continue to work with City Attorney's Office and with Madison Metro and the other partners to finalize language for agreement and then bring something back, hopefully in December.
Yep, members, you're all in agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on to agreements and contracts. Number 2, Pleasant View Golf Course Improvements, addendum number 3 for additional construction phase services by Norby Golf Course Design, Inc. This comes to us from the Pleasant View Golf Course Advisory Committee and Public Works.
I will move approval to approve the contract addendum for the Norby Golf Course Design on behalf of the Golf Course Committee and Public Works.
And thank you, and I will second that as a member of Public Works. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the addendum number 3 for additional construction phase services by Norby Golf Course Design, Inc. signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to item number 3 under agreements, legal services retainer agreement with Murphy Desmond SC. And I hope everybody noted the very exciting news that after 45 years, if I did the math right, Larry is going to finally enjoy retirement. Congratulations, Larry.
Thank you.
You will leave very big shoes for Matt and Bill and Pete to fill.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all you've done for Middleton and hope to see you around. Maybe not at meetings because you should be enjoying yourself instead.
I won't be hiding, so.
So would someone like to move approval of the legal services retainer agreement so that we can discuss.
I will move approval.
Roman second.
Thank you. All right. Discussion.
We need our attorney approval to approve the attorney agreement.
Is it subject to city attorney review and approval?
No,
I noted one thing. Can you guess,
Uh-oh.
can you
Oh,
guess, can
yeah.
you guess what it is, Larry?
no.
Equal benefits.
Oh,
So that, if you could add that,
sure.
yeah, so I'll make a note. Equal benefits to be added. All right. Well then, there being no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the legal services retainer agreement with Murphy Desmond SC to include the equal benefits clause signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. And Larry, until you retire, you're going to be hearing a lot of commendations and thanks and appreciation. So just be
We'll
ready
see
for that.
about that.
Okay, moving on to resolutions. We have two items. The first one is resolution 2023-51, payment of assessments for Pheasant Branch Road Sidewalk Addition. Comes to us from Public Works Committee.
This is Wilkus. I'll move approval on behalf of Public Works.
This is Haniro. I will second that. Any discussion?
This was an ask from the residents of the Pheasant Branch condominiums. Bottom line, they weren't thrilled about having this put upon in the first place, and therefore not thrilled about absorbing the cost and simply want to spread it out over time. And I guess city finance has no issues with this, and nor does Sean or anybody else. Then I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2023-51, payment of assessments for Pheasant Branch Road Sidewalk Addition, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Moving on to resolution 2023-52, removing Associated Trust Company, National Association, and appointing U.S. Bank Trust Company, National Association to serve as fiscal agent in connection with outstanding obligations. Can I get a motion to approve?
Norman will approve.
Thank you.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. All right, discussion, and I'll let you know that, so according to my conversation with Bill earlier, US Bank will take over the payment of our bond obligations, and we will use them for future bond issues. And this one action will approve the change for all the issues listed in Exhibit A. If you want to show Exhibit A, that's why, if you were wondering why there were so many copies of the agreement in the packet, it's because there were 11 different agreements, one for each of the issues. I did have a question for Larry about the brackets that appear in some of these. It looks like they're optional items. Bill will find an example.
Yeah, it's very common in resolutions from bond counsel. I'm not sure specifically. I think the fact is that, for example, in paragraph 7A, they need to get the specific dates for mandatory redemption prior to maturity and get it filled out. And then they send it back to us. I honestly don't know why there are brackets on the first page. But clearly these are things which typically we have very little input on. These agreements were drafted by bond counsel, not by us. But I've seen things like this before, and I wouldn't be terribly concerned. But obviously they need to get these back with all of the blanks filled in before the city officer should sign.
Yeah, and I think in the packet, there is the kind of standard form agreement, which is the one that has the brackets. And then all of those other items that's making your packet so long are the specific agreements filled out for each individual issue. So I think all of that is in your packet, but we'd be executing one of these fiscal agency agreements for each issue.
Right.
So they're all titled fiscal agency agreement, but in the first whereas clause, it identifies the dollar amount and the date of the issue. And there's one of these for each of those items in Exhibit A.
Okay, so then do we need to have the motion specify subject to city attorney review and approval to deal with the brackets? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, then I will make a substitute motion to approve, I lost my page. To approve resolution 2023-52, subject to city attorney review and approval.
This is Wilkes, I'll second.
All right. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the substitute motion to approve resolution 2023-52, removing Associated Trust Company National Association and appointing U.S. Bank Trust Company National Association to serve as fiscal agent in connection with outstanding obligations, subject to city attorney review and approval, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. And bids and quotes. We have one, award of bid to Iconica for the library restroom remodeling project. Can I get a motion to approve?
This is Jackson. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Lorman, second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I just have a question about what remaining funds we have in the capital budget right now, as of today's date. Do you know? off the
Yeah,
top of your
at
head?
this point, we don't have a particular project identified to draw this from. I think that there's a confidence that overall across all of our capital projects, we will have at least this amount available. So I think the intent is to wait until we get closer to the end of the year and then give you the list and we can identify where that is coming from specifically.
Okay, so this will come back to finance when that happens, or
Yeah, the approval of the bid will not, but the allocation of the excess funds will.
will come back? Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the award of bid to Iconica for the library restroom remodeling project signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to miscellaneous, we have two items. First is the update on 2023 third quarter investment reports. Bill.
Yeah, as always, no action on this item. It is just informational and includes the reports for the last 3 months. We've continued to see interest rates move up a little bit over the last 3 months, although rates are starting to stabilize. The Federal Reserve has paused in their latest meeting for raising the Federal Reserve Fund rates. And actually, just over the last week, we've actually seen yields go down pretty much across the board based on some of the economic activity. What we're seeing for our portfolio, our weighted average yield on our portfolio shown in the red line, that's continued to move up incrementally to an average of 3.67%. The short-term rates of the LGIP and the 90-day Treasury bill are up at about 5.25%. And what we're seeing is that as investments that we've been holding mature, we're able to reinvest those at higher rates, mostly between the 5% and 6% rate. And as we continue to reinvest, the weighted average yield of our portfolio is moving up. Looking at the structure of our portfolio, looking at investments to maturity, this table shows at the end of September, we had about $71 million invested. That's weighted heavily towards the cash and investments up to 1 year. Part of that is related to the structure of the yield curve that after you get beyond a year, you start to see declines in the available interest rates. Part of that is based on cash flow, that we have a major project underway right now for Pleasant View Road, which is why the audit of the bills was as high as it was, because we have some large payments for that project, as well as we get closer to the end of TIF District number 3 and potential for wanting to pay off obligations and look at whether we want to close that district early. We want to keep a majority of our cash available shorter term. That said, we still do have some investments that are going out to up to in the 3 to 5 year range, and those are intended to provide some protection for us so that if we were to see an economic turn and interest rates drop significantly, that we would have some investments that have those longer terms so we continue to provide a higher yield for us. Just going to switch over momentarily to a sheet that shows some activity since the final date of that report. So I think it's a good illustration of what we're seeing in the market right now. So just in the last month or so, we've had about $5 million of investments that have matured. Those included a couple shorter term treasury bills that were earning 4.6 to about 5%. We had a 1-year CD for $1 million earning at 4%. And then we had a 2-year CD that was earning at 1%. And that really shows how much interest rates have changed over the last 2 years. We reinvested that $5 million in a combination of items. We have some smaller negotiable CDs. We have a broker that when he sees a particularly good marketable CD available, lets us know about that opportunity. We've got some great CD rates at the 5.65 to 5.8%. We did a federal home loan bank agency issue for $1 million for a year, or a year at 6%, which is an amazing rate, seeing things back up in the 6s. And then we have a couple CDs with local banks, one which was collateralized for a year at 5.65. And we did go out 3 years on one of these with a CDAR CD for $2 million at 4.75. And again, that is, we can get higher rates today by keeping that short term or up to a year, but we don't want to move all of our investments to 1 year and then have that risk that a year from now or 2 years from now, we see a significant drop in rates. So we're keeping a portion of our portfolio invested a little longer to give us that protection. But that kind of highlights what we're seeing in the market and what our strategy is. I'd answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill?
Those CD rates are really good. It's impressive.
I had a question about our checking accounts and just why don't we earn any interest on those?
Yeah, so the way our agreement, so our primary banking is with Park Bank. When the city had gone to RFP originally, we looked at options of paying for fees and earning interest on all of our funds, and an alternative of having a certain balance that we would maintain. And by maintaining that portion of our balance with no interest, that we would not be subject to any separate fees. That served us really well when interest rates were low. Periodically, as rates have increased, we have asked about having those compensating balances reduced. And I just had that conversation with Park Bank within the last couple of days, showing the last time we had the reduction and where interest rates are now. And can we take a look at those balances to have that amount not earning interest reduced, reflecting that interest rates have moved up. And so if you did that analysis today compared to when we did the RFP, that adjustment is warranted.
Okay.
So that is the reason.
Thank you.
Beyond those balances, everything that is at Park Bank is earning at a rate based on where the LGIP, the local government investment pool, is earning.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Bill on this? Hearing none. Thank you, Bill. Can you please move on to item number 2, which is the update on the 2023 third quarter general fund financial reports. And just for the folks who are coming in, we appreciate you being here. And yes, please do fill out a form if you wish to make a public comment or at least express your position. But I would ask that everybody try to, take conversations outside so we can hear our finance director's update.
Yeah, this information for the general fund has been updated from what was originally in your budget books. This is actuals through the end of September. And the projections are a combination of the department projections, although for some items where there's new information available, we have updated that projected column as well. We are seeing revenues projecting above budget as well as expenditures under budget. So we are anticipating that we will likely have a surplus for 2023. On the revenue side, a couple of things I want to highlight. First is room tax. Year to date, we were at $270,000. That year-to-date number just includes the first and second quarters. Our room tax is payable a month after the end of the quarter. So we just received our third quarter room tax returns, and that was a record quarter. It's the highest that we've received. So I actually, based on that information that just came in, I'm projecting we'll probably be above the $600,000 projection for room tax. We are seeing some additional revenue coming in, for some smaller grant programs, law enforcement grants, county aid from the county signal aid. Building permits are running very strong. Overall in licenses and permits, we're about $46,000 over. Public charges for services, various items here. Part of that would be EMS revenue, plan commission charges, recreation programming are all going very strong. In this projection, I have interest invested projected at target for budget. I'm hopeful, especially based on some of the rates that we've seen, that we may actually do a little bit better than that. But overall revenue projection compared to where we're budget, if we factor out the difference between fund balance applied, about $250,000 to the positive on the revenue side. On the expenditures, the main area where there are savings are from where there were vacancies in positions. So under city administration, we had some savings from the communication position before that was hired. Law enforcement, police department, as Brian spoke to in the joint meeting with the vacancies we've had there, that's a large source of the personnel vacancy savings. And some smaller amounts across the various other departments. So just kind of going to the bottom line in interest of time, when we factor in revenues over budget, savings from expenditures, projected surplus is about $600,000 for the general fund. I should say that is before the use of the funds that were discussed at the Personnel and Finance Committee for the retention incentives. That's about a $200,000 program. So that will come off of that. And obviously there are things that can change between now and the end of the year, but it should be a healthy surplus from what we're seeing at this point.
Great. Thank you for that, Bill. Any comments or questions from Finance Committee members?
Just want to say thank you, Bill, and the great work you guys are doing. That is an awesome budget right there.
It is much appreciated. All right. Well, if there are no further comments or questions or discussion, we've reached the end of our Finance Committee agenda and we stand adjourned.
Thank you.